We left in the middle of the night with our 4 children and, just drove away to the unknown. I started to really firmly believe in the power of choice because I saw how it changed our lives. I always had those internal questions that I had pushed down my whole life, even my childhood. And then as an adult, they're not going away. They're just getting stronger. I've heard that when you get to that point where you're dreaming of just disappearing, that's like red flags. What would it be like if I did have control of my life? If I could make decisions for myself and my family, what would that look like? So many people just live these dreamless lives, but we were created to dream and to dream big dreams, and that's what makes the world so beautiful.
Welcome to the Trailblazers, the space where high-achieving women finally exhale and feel deeply understood.
We are Brittany Anderson and Disha Solanki, two leaders who have built, scaled, exited, and supported multi-8 and 9-figure companies
while carrying far more than most people ever see.
Here we go where most conversations stop.
The burnout, the pressure, the ambition, the identity shifts, the invisible load, and the moments you almost quit.
This is where the real story begins.
Trailblazers.
So Jasmine, it's lovely to meet you and lovely to have you on the podcast today. And I would love for you to share with our listeners, start from the beginning, before the success that you've got right now. And where did it all begin, or how did your journey begin generally?
Of course. Yeah. And first of all, thank you so much, Disha, for inviting me here. I'm grateful that our paths met, and I really look forward to where we're going. So I'm going to start with just giving a little recap of my whole story. So just there's some background there. So long story short, my husband and I were both raised in a high control religious organization. We got married there. We started our family there. We actually grew into leadership there. And over the course of several years, our faith in that structure started to crumble. And we started to realize very slowly that there was a lot of fear being used for control. And at that point, we didn't know it, but this place could really be classified as a cult. So it got to the point where we're in our early 30s and we had to make a decision that would be life-changing. And we did that. We left in the middle of the night with our 4 children and, just drove away to the unknown. We wound up in this little town right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and we just had to start from scratch. So what that meant for us was literally cutting ties with everything we had built up until that point in our lives. So we started with no vehicle, no home, no money, no connections really, and really no family because, you have to pretty much just close the door and walk away. And then our family who had left previously was really in their own struggle at that point too, just trying to get on their feet. So there wasn't any family support for us. So for us, what that meant was it was years of a lot of undoing because, being raised to not trust your own voice, your own inner knowing, to always told what to do by something outside of you, or even having God's word defined for you and what his will was for your life. And all just being raised that way, there's so much to undo where you have to learn oh wait, I was created with my own soul and my own will, and I have an intellect that works, and I have a choice, and I actually can decide how I want my life to be. So as I, grew into that through a lot of undoing and rebuilding, I started to really firmly believe in the power of choice because I saw how it changed our lives. And then I saw so many people, and I still do, and this is why I'm so passionate about the work I do, is that there's so many people that are stuck. Like for me, it was in this organization, but there's other people that are just stuck in so many different circumstances, whether it even be just their own mindset or a job or a relationship, where all they need to do is make a choice, really, to start. There's a lot that comes after that, but the power of choice is so real. So, like I said, long story short, that's what got me to where I am now.
How did you know? Because you grew up in what you now describe as a cult setting. How did you know that that was not quite right? Or what point was it that the light bulb came on and you were like, I have to leave this scenario?
That's a really good question because it wasn't just like an instant where it was just like lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to do this. It was I like to think of a digital picture and like all the pixels kind of just like slowly falling out. And then all of a sudden you realize like, what am I standing on? Where am I? I have no idea what's going on here because all of a sudden this picture that you thought was perfect around you has just like disintegrated. That's kind of what it was like for me.
Okay. Describe a typical day that you would have had back then so we can make a comparison in time about
Oh
what
my
where
gosh.
life is like right now. Like
Uh,
what looked fine from the outside,
mhm.
but that wasn't really fine at all.
Oh gosh, no one's asked me this before. This is fun. Okay, so I would wake up really early most days because there was so much work to be done. We lived communally, so we shared houses. Like our family had one bedroom in a house with multiple other families and single people. We shared all our meals. We met 2 times a day for worship. So I would get up usually around 4:30 or 5 in the morning. My job there was I managed the household, so I took care of the schedules, all the food shopping, all the personal needs shopping. I would tell the women what meals to make, how to make them, where the ingredients were. I was usually being woken up by a knock on the door at 4:35 in the morning. "Hey, where's tell me about breakfast." Even if I had left a note about breakfast, like they had some kind of question,
Yeah.
for the team that was making breakfast and so it was just constant, like nonstop. Then get the children up. They were required to be dressed and ready and presentable for the morning gatherings, which was like our worship service. Usually it was held around 6 a.m. You
Yeah.
know, everybody was required to be there, down to the smallest child, and they would stand. It was usually like an hour long, and we would sing, and people would share, and sometimes it was a teaching where, one of the elders would give a dissertation. And then, the children were required to stand there and be quiet and listen, and if you didn't have your kids in line, that was your problem as a parent, to take them out and spank them and get back, and so a lot of just pressure, and always people were watching and comparing, like, how you're doing, especially when as a parent, because children were like, the next generation is such a big deal that they're
Yeah.
raised in the way they should go. And so from there, there'd be a communal breakfast, and then the day would go on to where, like, the men would leave to work, the women would stay home and do all the household, making meals, taking care of children, teaching classes, whatever specific community did. Like, different communities did different things. Like, some communities had construction crews, some communities ran delis, some communities did both, or some communities had farms. So, whatever the work of the day was,
Yep.
we got done. There'd be a communal lunch again, then same thing afternoon, and then again, another worship service in the evening, and then usually dinner. And then family time was usually after everything was done, after the cleanup was done. You're washing dishes for 60 to 100 people, cleaning the house, and then finally around like maybe 9 o'clock at night, get some family time to where you tuck your kids in bed and then you're just exhausted. For me, since I was in leadership, there was a lot of times meetings at night. So other
Must
people
have
would put
been
my kids.
difficult for you as a parent as well, though, because,
Mhm.
I'm sure that maybe they told you how to parent while they were there, which may not have been in alignment with you as a human.
Right. Yes. Oh gosh, that would be another podcast, and oh gosh, there's a lot to that.
Yeah. What part of you knew, Jasmine, when this wasn't feeling right, or you first suspected this isn't normal? Like, what did you notice about yourself or the situation that you were in?
I like how you frame that, like, what did I notice about myself? Because I think that's really where I started to consider more than what I was being told, because I could feel just that unease within myself, that dissonance really. Even though I had been raised that way and raised to think a certain way, I always had those internal questions that I had pushed down my whole life, even my childhood. And then as an adult, they're not going away. They're just getting stronger, you know? So when I started asking those questions and realizing there was no answer or no real answer, besides the rhetoric that I had been told my whole life. And then that alongside watching what happened to other families that had left or been kind of excommunicated because they didn't, raise their kids according to the teachings or different things. My parents were included in that. So seeing just the devastation that happened with families, and then raising my own family and realizing that my kids were not super in line, and I was going to have to go through some tough stuff with them. And I was like, I don't want to end up like that. I love what I have as a family with my children. I want that relationship, and I'm not going to let that be sabotaged by like my faith
Yep.
in this.
How long before did your parents leave? Because that must have been difficult for you too, because they're your family at the end of the day. Aside from the fact that I'm assuming that everyone
Yeah.
had to be classed as your family, but they're your parents.
They left a few years before we did. I think it was 4 or 5 years, and that
You
was
stayed a while after they
yeah.
left.
Because in that situation, it's almost like you feel like, "Okay, now that they're gone, their hope is that I stay," and
Yeah,
I keep true to the faith that they had so that they can see there's still hope for them, that kinda thing. So there's even more pressure
yeah.
to live up to the calling.
What part of you knew before your mind knew that you could admit it? Before your mind could admit it is what I'm trying to say. So you were saying that you had like a gut feeling, like there was a feeling inside of you, and that maybe your brain hadn't quite caught up with it. What would it be now when you reflect on it?
Oh, like, I think I like to just say it's my heart, like, in your heart, you know.
Mm. Did you feel like there was an internal cost of staying in the situation that you were in?
Definitely. I mean, it would have been if we had stayed longer. I really felt I was to the point where I couldn't go on. I wanted to disappear. Like I've been through therapy since then and they said,
Mhm.
I've heard that when you get to that point where like you're dreaming of just disappearing,
Yep.
that's like red flags. And
Wow.
I didn't know, but that's where I had gotten to even and just internally.
So you mentioned, and I agree with you, that, your run up to leaving was not a single moment. It was probably a series of events and a series of emotions that led you to a new chapter. How did you get into that new chapter? What changed? Was it one night? Was it a plan? And how did you go? Because your story is incredible, Jasmine. To be able to get out of that situation to what you've built now and with your children must have taken bravery, resilience, and so much more.
Yeah. So after we left, I would say it took at least a year for my brain to just kind of calm down. Like there's so many
Mhm.
conflicting thoughts, and I just didn't really even know what was up from down. But in that place, I would say that's like we call it the valley, like the deep, dark valley. In that place, one thing I did know is I had to keep moving. There were days that, I would just be in bed crying all day, but I had a purpose because I had my kids, I had to show up for them. So
Yep.
that was a lifesaver. But then for me, like, I had never in my life done anything for me. And that was the first time I started realizing, like, "Oh, I have to do something for me if I'm gonna get through this." And I found just little things I could do, just, like, notice the beautiful sunrise and just take 5 minutes to soak it in.
Mhm.
Or there was a rec center within walking distance from our little tiny apartment, so I went and started taking classes over there, like aerobics classes with other women, and for an hour, my youngest kids would be in the childcare, and I would just have that time, and so just little, little steps, you know?
What was the switch that made you go, I'm going to leave this scenario and I'm going to build a new life
You mean after we left or while we were still there?
while you were still there?
Well, it kinda happened over the course of several months because I had this dream, and I remember it so clearly that in the dream, I was in this house and I had so much peace, and it was quiet and calm, and there was just this sense of ownership and control, really, and I looked around and it was just beautiful, there was sunlight coming in the windows, and I was just felt very grounded.
Yep.
And when I woke up, I actually felt shame and really strongly, like that kind of feeling where you're hot and tingly and you're like, "Why did that come to me? Why am I thinking that way?" That's the devil, like, rolling out the red carpet for me. That's a life I should never have, I should never dream of. Why did it but it wouldn't go away. I kept thinking about it, like, "Wait a second," like, I felt so peaceful. It felt so right, you know?
Yeah.
And it was so different than the life I had then at that point. And so I started, like, allowing myself here and there to kinda dream of, like, what would it be like if I did have control of my life? If I could make decisions for myself and my family, what would that look like? And even though it felt so in that context, it was a guilty pleasure, I guess, like, but it was actually, like, what we're supposed to do as humans. And then I think just allowing myself to open my mind in that way, I started seeing all, like, I started to see little things where there's just so much misalignment and really how the control and the fear was being used, and started just speaking up and asking questions.
Yep.
And when I realized, hey, there's no really good answers here, but I still wanted to test my faith in that and see if it was real. So we actually got rebaptized. We went through a whole like process where we're like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it, we're going to give it one last shot basically. And then I just remember a day after they had moved us again because they're like, "Oh, well, maybe we'll just move you to a different." That's what they did a lot with families who were struggling or whatever. They just kind of move people around, reset, I guess. So we moved back to Savannah, Georgia, and lived there for a few months. And I remember just one day, Jed came home from work and I said, "I can't do it anymore. I just can't." And at that point, it wasn't even emotional anymore. It was just like, it is what it is. And he said, "Okay." And from there, we only gave ourselves 5 days and we were like to plan because those were the worst 5 days of our life. I mean, you're living with friends and people you love, and you're basically, you have a secret, you're lying to
Yep.
them and they don't know you're never going to see them again. They're never going to see you again. And we had to, get some money wired to us so that we could rent a truck and put a few belongings in there and leave in the middle of the night.
It sounds like you were looking for home, Jasmine. That's what it
Yeah.
sounds like. It sounds like you're looking for a place where you could be you, and that was perfectly fine. Would I be right in assuming that?
Yes, and it's funny you say that because that's my business now is we build homes for people. So we're a luxury home builder here in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I guess that is the passion. I do want everyone to be able to have that space where they feel at home.
Yeah. In this season where you were pivoting, what was the hardest conversation that you had to have?
Oh, the hardest conversation I had to have before we left the group was really just within myself, I think,
Yeah.
asking the questions like, what, not only like, can we do this, but what does that mean for us? Like, for like everything we had been taught our whole lives was that it was either this or the lake of fire. You're basically, you know the truth, and so because you know the truth, if you ever turn your back on that, you have the harshest judgment of all.
Mhm.
So it was on me to make that decision for my children and my family. And I'm just, so you this internal struggle of like, do I keep believing that or do I believe my heart and follow that?
And while you were building internally, you're also building externally, right? Because you had to leave and you had responsibilities, right? And I would love to know what that success, the journey to the success that you have right now looks like. Not the highlight reel that people see now, but because I know that you've gone through a really tough journey to be where you are today. And that's taken something to create the incredible success you have. And what do you think are the real drivers that have helped you get here to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love how you said, I don't want to hear the highlight reel because I know so many of us really want that, the story behind the story. And that's what I'm telling. Like right now, I'm actually in the process of writing my book called Dreams That Matter, and it is my story. And I'm going to go through really the truth of what it takes to undo and then rebuild, and actually
Mhm.
undo and rebuild at the same time. And that's really what it was. Like I said, for the first year, it was just a lot of confusion. Once I finally started to stand on my own feet, I started making choices for myself, and I didn't even really have some kind of big, huge vision. I could dream of a better life, and I knew I needed to do something for me to build my own confidence since I had been so stripped of me in the way I had been raised. So I decided to go back to school, and I wanted to get a college degree. And I didn't realize that applying for college meant I had to have a high school transcript, which I didn't even technically have. I had been homeschooled within the group, and I got to a certain point in my education, they're like, "You're good." And I didn't know that meant, I didn't really have a high school diploma.
Yep.
So I find myself at 31 years old in this class with high school dropouts and criminals, getting my high school diploma so I can enroll in college. And I think that was the first big step I ever took for myself. And, just every step builds on the next. Getting into college was huge. And I went to community college for 2 years. And at that point, I wasn't really telling people my whole story. But when I would tell pieces of it to my professors or whatever, there was just so much support. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, Jasmine, how can we help you?" And I received so much generosity and just encouragement along that part of my journey. And then I graduated from Lipscomb University here in Nashville. That's a pretty well-known business school. And it was May of 2020. So the last semester of my school was, when all the craziness happened with COVID and we went
Yeah.
online, completely virtual. So I took my kids on spring break that March, I think, and no one went back to school after that. So everybody was online. So here we were at home. We're actually in the middle of our own renovation. And so then all of us are trying to do our schoolwork at home. We didn't even have Wi-Fi, so we're using hotspots. And I had my last semester of college I'm trying to finish up. So it was really heavy course load. And then trying to help my kids, all four of my kids, do their classwork. And Jed had just gotten let go from his job because he had told them that we were going to start our company. And they had said, okay, well, you have till the end of February, then you go. And we hadn't expected that. So we didn't even have an income at that point. And so all that. Oh, and then we were also taking care of his dad who had stage 4 cancer and helping him through that. And we're the only close relatives. So that was just a huge, even emotional burden on
Of
us.
course it is.
And my husband is going through all the steps to set up our business with getting the contractor license and the LLC and all that because I had no more bandwidth. And
You
so
had
all this,
enough going on, I do
yeah,
think.
yeah.
Your small steps, your brave
Yeah.
small steps had all accumulated into a
Yes,
lot of things.
exactly. I mean, over that, the course of the time where I was going to school, we also had bought a house, renovated it, sold it, bought another house, and we're doing the same thing. So, some of us are just suckers for punishment, but we just keep moving. And so at that point, I would say that was another kind of valley. That's one misconception I think is sometimes people might think if I make this one big choice and I change my life and then it's just uphill from there. It's not really. You're
Mhm.
gonna encounter other valleys and maybe even some landslides, but what you do have is you have the confidence that you've built from taking the steps to get there and you can keep growing forward. So at that point, we went through a lot, even in the beginning of starting our company with just even misalignment in our marriage. Like our marriage got to a really, really difficult place where it could have been justified to end it.
You've
And
been
we had
through a lot, Jasmine, and I can only assume you'd been together a very long time, even at this point, but you were growing into different humans.
exactly. And that's what happens is like when you go along the journey, you start becoming a different version of yourself. And you have to figure out if that's still going to align.
Mhm.
We did not marry the same people we are today. But we had to make that choice. Like, what do we want? Do we want to keep doing this together? Do we want to grow together and have a vision that we're working toward together? Or is that not where we're going anymore? And we had to really get clear on that because like I said, it did get to the point where there was a lot of tension and there was things that happened that were hurtful on both sides. And we had to kind of recalibrate, I think is the word I'd use, recenter, figure out where our alignment was, and then make some hard decisions too, because like I had put a lot of work into my personal development and growth, and my husband had just had his head down making money to keep the family going.
Yep.
And he hadn't really had that opportunity or maybe given that to himself.
Yeah.
So he had to not get resentful toward me,
Which
but
is easy to do. That's the
yeah.
easy way out, right?
Exactly. So, and then, he did make that choice to start working on himself, which I'm really grateful for. We have continued to grow together.
What's the one thing, and I bet you have a million of them, but I would love to know if there is one, and of course, say more than one if you can't narrow it down to one, that you did that made you feel like you grew as a person and it felt more aligned or you felt like you could grow quicker. Was there any one thing that you put into action in your life you could say that you thought, no, I can get through this and I can continue to grow the family? Because you have a lot of responsibilities, Jasmine, 4 children that you were homeschooling in 2020 while going through college yourself. And you were also a carer for your father-in-law whilst growing your own business or forced to grow your own business, let's say, home renovations and another renovation. That's a
Yeah,
lot to take. And then to continue growing from there as well.
right. The thing that helped me the most was obviously becoming, a person who I trust, through the steps, through putting myself through school and making the choices, all the small choices. But then once we started our company and we're kind of getting to this new level, and this entrepreneurship is like the most intensive personal growth
Yeah.
development plan you can enroll in, right?
Mhm.
I don't think I realized that right away. But one thing I did know is that I really wanted to not take the long road. I wanted to get the help and mentorship, coaching from people who had been through it before, who've gone places I want to go,
Yeah.
and pull from their wisdom and get their support. And so that's what I did really early on in growing the company. And I've continued to do that. And for me, that's been the best choice I ever made, really. Not only for, growing the business and growing the team and doing that sustainably, but also staying true to who I am and continuing to grow into the person I want to be.
I love that, Jasmine, because there's a lot to be said for trusting yourself, which I do believe a lot of us women do not do. We always second guess ourselves, and trusting ourselves is something that we're not great at. What's the one piece of advice that you would give to anyone listening who struggles with this? Because there's so many of us women listening. I do believe no matter how successful they are, they're doing
Mhm.
everything right, or they feel like they're doing everything right. They're going through the motions, but it still feels heavy for them. And not trusting themselves, I do think, is one of the things that keeps them stuck where they are right now.
I want to kind of turn this a little bit because it's the same theme. It's just for me, where I'm at in my life right now is, and I think this will resonate with a lot of the people who listen to this, is that we have to push so hard at certain points in our life. We have to push so hard, and it's like this forceful energy.
Mhm.
And we're making these bold decisions. We're being brave. We're doing the thing. We're pushing, and it's just like so much energy, and we're exerting. And then there comes a point where it's like that's not sustainable anymore.
Yep.
And for me, especially lately, I've been realizing that's where I'm at now. And I love nature analogies, so I'm just going to use that because I love it when I see those plants that have pushed through concrete or like some really hard soil. And I just look at that and I can resonate with that so well because yes, that little plant had to do what it took to push and grow the roots and push through the soil. But
Mhm.
now that it's pushed through, its job is to reach toward the sun and to reach toward and trust its roots that it's grown, you know? And like still draw from your roots, but reach toward the sun. So that's where I'm at now. And I think a lot of women will resonate with this is like it's more of a releasing and it's more of a letting go and surrender than it
Mhm.
is a force anymore. And there's so much power in that. Because for me, it's like when I think of reaching toward the sun, I'm thinking of reaching toward that thing that energizes me. What is that thing that makes me so grateful and just grow and stand tall and pull me upward into that expansive space that is who I'm meant to be. So I would say trust your roots because you've done the hard work. Stop forcing, stop working so hard, like start reaching and opening up and allowing that light in.
What do you think would be one misconception about wanting to start over, or the success that you're, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, that you're having, or leaving a highly controlled environment, that a misconception that people have? And obviously highly controlled environments could be in the form of many things. It could be relationships, it could be business partnerships, it could be, a friend circle that you are part of and you don't want to be part of anymore. What's that misconception that you think that most of us women should throw away?
Yes. The thing that comes to mind first for me is that because I've heard it so many times, and even recently, I've heard someone say, "Oh, I just wasted all that time." It's not wasted time. That's
Mm.
part of the journey. And there's so many things that you learn through that and that you experience and the person you became through that. So it's not wasted time. Yes, it might feel like wreckage right now. It might be wreckage, but there's so much in that you can use to grow forward. So don't I used to do this too to myself, just really discredit myself and start comparing like, "Ah, here I am 35 years old and I'm just getting started." But I
Yeah.
wasn't just getting started. Like I had so much to draw from. So yeah, don't discredit the time that you think was wasted because it wasn't.
And I think many of us are, you're quite right, like guilty of that because each one of the minutes of our day is generally accounted for. And we feel
Yes.
like if it wasn't a smart use, like we have like all of this criteria right behind
Yes,
what goes
exactly.
behind our
Yes.
time. And then if it's fruitless or it comes to nothing, like, oh, that was exhausting waste of time. And you then start replaying like, the past, which you can't change, and what you could have
No.
done with that time. But
Yeah,
you didn't do it, and that's okay. Everything happens in its own good time, right?
exactly. We wanna try to control everything, but we can't. There's so much that we can't control, so we have to come to that realization and just let it be.
Jasmine, where are you now? Because you've come from where you've come from to where you are now. You're achieving some incredible success in all areas of life. Who are you now, and what does this chapter bring for you?
Right now, I'm really excited to be working on a book that's I mentioned earlier. It's called Dreams That Matter, and it's my memoir. It tells all the details of growing up the way I did, and then bringing me to the choice where we decided to change our entire life and rebuild something completely different. And then, I'll go through the rebuilding as well.
Yep.
So I'm super excited about that.
When does your
Who I
book release? When are you planning on releasing?
Yes, the plan right now is August 2026.
Really
Yeah,
exciting.
we're making really good progress, and I'm excited to show people the journey. And, I'm putting little tidbits out there. So if you want to follow along, that's great. I'm on a lot of different platforms.
And the links will be in the show
Yeah.
notes for all your social media handles and your website too.
Perfect. Thank you. And then as far as who I am as a person, I am really stepping into the new level of sharing my story in a way that will empower others to believe in their own inner voice and the power they have to choose.
Mhm.
And not just choose once, but choose again and again and again to build the life of their dreams. Because I firmly believe that the life of your dreams begins the moment you choose to build it.
What are your dreams now compared to what they were then, Jasmine?
Oh, wow. Then I didn't really even know how to dream. I knew some things. I knew I wanted some land and I wanted to be in a place where I could be near nature, but also near great energy, like, the city of Nashville. I had some things like that. Now, my big dream is really to live my life to its very fullest.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of pieces to that, and the piece I'm working on right now is my personal mission, which I believe I have the story I do, is to be able to give back to others in that way that releases them, because the thing that saddens me the most is when I see so much potential in people, they're not making the choices they need to live into that potential, because
Mhm.
we're always choosing whether it's intentional or not, right?
Yep.
And then once you choose, it's a commitment, like, are you gonna commit to that? And so, my message is really to those people that they have so much to live into, and I just wanna empower them to do it, and, I don't wanna say, like, I'm not a coach, I don't, like, have some kind of, like, five-step plan or something like that.
Yep.
I'm just telling my story because I think it can be very empowering.
And the key here is that many of us have choices, right? Sometimes there are some people who don't realize what choices they have ahead of them. There are some who know they have choices and don't act on them. And then there are others who have choices and don't know which one to pick, right?
Right.
And it's having the bravery and listening to that gut feeling, a bit like what you said, dream. What does your dream look like? And maybe that choice that you're going to make an action will be easier than it was before.
It's usually the thing that scares you.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I wanna add one more thing to go along with this. The book is called Dreams That Matter because I had to learn that my dream did matter, and even that I
Mhm.
had a dream, you know? And so many people just live these dreamless lives, but we were created to dream and to dream big dreams, and that's what makes the world so beautiful. And so part of my big picture vision is that with whatever comes of this book, I am gonna put that toward an organization that does give back to people who need support in reaching toward their dreams. So I don't have that figured out exactly what that's going to look like yet, but that's something that's really close to my heart to have the resources there for the woman I was 10 years ago.
Yeah. That's amazing, Jasmine, because I bet there's many women that were in the situation like you were 10 years ago and don't know where to turn. And it would be
Yeah,
helpful,
yeah.
if there was someone there or a place safe place they could go to. What decision could a listener make and implement this week, do you think, that would an idea, a practice, some really small step that the listener could put into place this week to change where they're going to achieve their dreams?
This week, and this goes into what I was talking about where I'm at in my personal life and just really stepping into power rather than just that forceful energy. I would love if the listeners, everyone who's listening, could take a minute to just do an alignment check. Like, where is it in your life? What is that one thing that you still feel like you're pushing and it's just taking so much of your energy? And it's exhausting you. And you think that if you let go, you'd be failing, but maybe you wouldn't. Maybe ask yourself just honestly, like, am I still forcing this thing because it's what I need to do, or is it still aligned with who I'm becoming, or maybe not? Is it something I can let go of?
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very I think alignment is my word of the year this year, because I do believe that everything becomes or life becomes easier when you live in alignment with yourself, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And we make it hard for some reason. I think a lot of us that are high achieving,
Mhm.
because it's had to be so hard in the past, we feel like we're not making the same progress if it's not hard. And so we unintentionally make it harder than it has to be.
Yes, and I totally agree with you on that. I have a saying for that, which I won't share because it has a swear word in it. But I do believe in that totally, Jasmine. Thank you so much for bringing your real self today. I really appreciate it. For anyone who would like to follow Jasmine or know more about her story, we will be dropping the links into the show notes. And that's all for today.
Thank you so much, Disha. This was wonderful. You have a great day.
If this episode supported you, share it with a woman you respect and want to lift up.
Join our free Trailblazers community, the space where high achieving women finally feel met.
You'll find the link in the show notes.
Until next time, keep moving forward, keep listening to yourself.
And remember, you deserve support too.